Hello and welcome back to another week of DXV podcasting. This week you've got Chris and myself as Ollie takes a little break before we get into Premiership action. What we'll look into cover off today is week 3 of all the autumn nations. That's all the big games, just the one game left next weekend. And then I look forward to the Premiership and our sort of main game coming back in online this weekend. Chris has had some fun, haven't you, mate?
Did indeed. Well, yeah, the game was fun. The journey back was less fun.
Yeah, but Twickenham for an England win.
Yeah. Great. I took 2 friends. We went, watched the game. They'd never been to kind of an international rugby match before, so that was good fun. I was probably giving them more like commentary than they wanted, but it's all good.
Take non-rugby people to a rugby game. Yeah.
But yeah, then it was literally we left the stadium about 6, and I didn't get home until like, bearing in mind it's an hour's journey home. Didn't get home until about 10:30 because the trains were a nightmare, and that's the biggest downside of Twickenham is just the transport links are terrible. It's a Sunday night, so reduced train services, and it's storm, whatever it was. That's terrible.
Yeah, it's quite so. Apologies to all the hardcore England fans out there for Chris calling it Twickenham. As we all know now, it should be called
Allianz. It's still in the place that is called Twickenham. It's just the stadium is called Allianz.
I'd agree, and I've always liked Twickenham as an actual stadium, but you're right. Sort of Richmond around it. The Cabbage Patch, the one pub if you're lucky enough to not leave and get a seat the night before or something. But yeah, rail sort of in and out. It's just not ideal, and I think it's one of the reasons that people such as myself, I love the Principality, not just because obviously it's in the middle of Wales, but Cardiff, you come out, pubs on your doorstep everywhere, food on the doorstep everywhere, hotels right in the middle of the city. It's just difficult. Trains on a Sunday though as well. That's something I hadn't really thought of.
It was a nightmare. Even Uber wouldn't come pick me up. So
I suppose they shut down half the roads, like to and from all the station and stuff. So
I had one guy picked it up who's like 13 minutes away. He's like, "Can you cancel it, please? Because it's too far away."
I don't want to come.
I just want to go home.
But at least you were going back home with a smile on your face. Unlike myself, who took a train out of Cardiff and then a 2.5 hour drive back home after a pretty bad loss to the Saffers in Cardiff.
So let's go through it then. So what do you make of Wales's autumn nations?
I like to think actually when I sort of look at the teams, got to be sort of disappointed maybe with the sort of Fiji loss maybe, but I think as a team you've got to say we definitely look better than the sort of Six Nations. The attack, I mean, it's like the sort of first game Wales come out and sort of we were like actually attacking like with some structure and some like where the hell did that come from? So I think as a team we're looking better, but we are off the pace, and I don't think we could chat about Gatland and the sort of 11 streak all the way, but yeah, I think as a team we are getting better, but I still think we are off the pace of where sort of the other teams are at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough. I think
it was really. I was chatting with a South African fan because I was sat next to like a South African family. I went with my little boy, and it was like sort of 2 parents with sort of little boys similar age as mine, and we were sort of chatting because there was a big sign. Somebody had a sign in front of us that said "Razzie drops high balls," and I just sort of I don't know why, but we just sort of were giggling about Razzie, and we got talking, and he said to me, if 6 months ago we swapped Razzie and Warren Gatland, Wales would be in the same place.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things that I say with sort of Gatland. I don't think there's any massive omission from like the Welsh team. It's not like he's purposely sort of leaving people out that we think would come in. Although you could coach them slightly differently to the way sort of Warren Gatland does, but I don't think as a as a sort of 15, as a 22, as a 23, as a bench, that the caliber is there just yet. When you look at going up against like number one in the world, South Africa, like Etzebeth went off, I think about 25 minutes in, and then sort of like to be replaced, but like immediately got replaced by like RG Snyman, and you're like usually losing someone like Etzebeth, you'd be like, oh, here we go, like he's out the way. You go, like, I don't know if that's better or worse.
Yeah.
Like and you bring in that sort of caliber on.
We had both of them at the same time, mate.
Just absolute. And so I think it is as a bit. There are some positives in there, like I said. Sort of the attack bit is definitely better now than what it was in the sort of Six Nations. There's a variety on, all right, not by choice, I think, but there's even more young guns coming through. Sort of Josh Hathaway had a storming game. I think he actually played really well and sort of coming in. So there's lots of new blood, lots of new caps, which is good as long as they're being sort of progressed and we see the sort of progression with them into a sort of strong international.
It's really interesting because you've got the contrasting of two, right? Because you had Warren Gatland and Steve Borthwick both came into their respective camps about the same time. Warren Gatland basically stuck some dynamite under everything and was like, let's go, and just changed his entire squad, brought in a bunch of people with no caps, no experience, got rid of some hugely experienced players, and like it had to happen. It had to happen. They were at the end of their tether.
Yeah.
But then you've got Borthwick who's tried to trickle them through. And what you've actually ended up with is both have ended up with ultimately disappointing performances so far this year. But it is interesting to watch and see when it'll start paying for Wales, if it starts paying for Wales.
And I think it's not going to be short term. I think no one's looking at Wales as a sort of France team 4 years ago as, oh my God, they're coming at Six Nations, they're going to turn some heads, they're going to upset people, they're going to start sort of beating the likes of sort of Ireland and England. I don't think it's short term. I think if left sort of alone, Gatland and this team now, it firmly is in the sort of 2-year limelight. It's past the Lions and looking towards a sort of the next World Cup. If it's not going to be short term, it's not going to be in the next year. But I think that the pressure, and usually for a well-seasoned team, that if they've had a bit of a bad run, the pressure is enough to sort of light a fire, light a spark, and you come back out in the Six Nations absolutely hungry, absolutely sort of But I think for Wales, I don't think we have
the quality for that.
Yeah, I don't think we have that team either. I think that like putting that much pressure on
They're trying. They're really trying.
Young heads, coming into Six Nations, we need to win. If you go through after the year that we've sort of had here, if you now go into the Six Nations and come bottom without at least one win, then there's some really big questions on sort of Gatland. And don't get me wrong, the really big questions outstanding on the Welsh Rugby Union as a whole and rugby in Wales as a whole that we're not even going to touch or breach. But I think Gatland now and the team that we've got, I think they have to look at the Six Nations. I think they have to look at 1-2 wins under your belt, sort of as a sort of minimum. Coming away from Six Nations, it's been a difficult year for Welsh rugby again on the whole, for the fans to sort of get back in. You were mentioning there about sort of Warren Gatland putting dynamite under, but we forget in a way that sort of his hand was forced a little bit. Like he got in, you lost Alan Wynne, Navidi went, no, thanks very much, I'm gone. Dan Bigger went, no, thanks very much, I'm gone. Tipuric went, thanks very much, I'm gone. And so there was quite a lot of people around sort of the half pennies and people that would put their hand up to leave anyway. And if you're coming in with a massively depleted side, then you might as well.
No, I know, but like there's been so much chopping and changing over that, and it almost has been like he's trying to build a squad from zero because he's capped so many players and like
Yeah.
rotated his team so much, and it's like it may pay dividends later. I think there's definitely an argument that Wales probably had kind of a golden generation, like that you
Yeah.
just so happened to come through and you had a really high quality squad and they played the way, and it was matched really nicely with Gatland because they played the way he wanted to
Yeah.
play, and they like, and it just worked.
And I
But
think,
like
yeah.
that's extremely difficult to recreate, and I think it's interesting to see like, so you have, for example, like what other nations are currently have a golden generation, right? So
Yeah.
like you can look at countries of comparable size, predominantly home nations. So if you said Ireland and Scotland, like what happens? And there are similar questions, even like I know Ireland are top tier and they have a really good development system, but like the question over Johnny Sexton not answered. The like what happens when Tag Byrne or when Andrew Porter or like any of these Bundyaki, like
Yeah.
do they have someone lined up? Or Scotland, for example, has a really good generation. It's really interesting to see. And then you have, on the other hand of the spectrum, you have people like nations like South Africa, where they've put in place systems where they now have like that success will continue to lead to success because they've built like
Such a, yeah. And I
like
think
they've
it starts with,
capped 50 something players.
it's the country. And again, I think Razzie said it in the sort of press. He was honest with the people at the beginning of the year and said that sort of this is a year. There's going to be lots of changes. We're sort of every game we're going to absolutely empty the bench. Every time we're going to bring new players in, we're going to drop people out. And it's not because of this. It's because this is just we want to have a look at people. We want
You
to
need
bring people in. We want
systematic
to,
change. You need to
yeah,
like
we need to come in and it is, and
continually refresh so you never find yourself in that situation where it's like, oh no.
it's also at the point where I've got 14, like 10, 12, like World Cup winners on that pitch. So that actually, I could probably take a bit of a risk there and a little bit of a risk there because, like the other 13s, like
And easily
every
get
other player
guys
on that
into it.
pitch isn't a risk. Every other player on that pitch is proven
Yeah.
at the highest level. Yeah, it's been sort of difficult. And don't get me wrong, I think there's been. I looked at the sort of home nations really when I sort of looked, and Scotland obviously a great win for them. Some really good play, and I think they've had a sort of an up and down year, but actually on the whole they'll be really happy with that year.
I don't know that we've learned that much about Scotland. I still think, like, I actually think this is a bit of a nothing year for Scotland. Like, lost. So if you look at their actual year, right? Like,
Yeah,
I get that, like, it's glazed over because they came off a win, but Six Nations lost to Italy, right? Which for that team that proposes they want to win stuff, like
yeah,
not just win individual games, not beat England in the tournament. That can't be your benchmark anymore if you want to be a really good team, but like win the trophy kind of thing. Like they lost to Italy, can't be doing stuff like that. Then they toured the Americas and came up against nobody of note, which was a bit of a nothing summer tour for them. They capped a lot of
yeah,
players, but basically an A-team tour for them. Then they had the Autumn Nations and they played South Africa, and granted they gave them a good game, but ultimately lost by 17 points. Played Portugal and put a big score on them, but cool.
yeah.
That like no disrespect to
Unless you're
Portugal.
Fiji in a World Cup, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, but then you go to you play Australia and yeah, you put a decent score on them, but even that, like
that's yeah,
Australia
and
didn't,
that's still
and
enough
everyone was
still in
singing
the team.
Australia's praises because they beat England and they beat Wales, but ultimately like they weren't, like they've historically been struggling and those two games weren't going to turn that around. It might have been a step in the development, but it's not. So I'm
Well,
not sure that we've learned much about Scotland or that they're like they've advanced this year at all.
I think
I don't know.
there is a little bit of Scotland. I think that actually, when you look back to the Six Nations, based off the fact that Wales had a appalling Six Nations, but I think Scotland came through and proved that traditionally games that you wouldn't I say like you wouldn't normally sort of expect them to win or expect actually like to make it a close game. And you said sort of like similar to England when we were looking at, it's the sort of progression of Scotland have now got to the point where they are getting like the wins there, like they can go out and beat Australia, they can play a bit, and they're not suddenly getting beaten by 30, 40 points. They're suddenly making it
I
close
know, but
games, or they're
they've
making
been
it
there
good
for
games. And so I
they've
think
been there for like
another
3
year,
years.
this Six Nations would be a good. I genuinely think apart from Ireland and I don't even want to say sort of France, because I don't think France are in the place that they want to be. But yeah, it makes it a tough Six Nations for Wales, because I think actually, apart from traditionally Italy, I think it's going to be a I
I
think
don't
it's
even
going
think
to be
that one.
it's going to be
I
a
don't think
weird
that's a stable game. Like I think
it's going to be a
Italy are a
weird Six
different team now.
Nations.
I think Scotland. I don't think we've learned much about them from this year. I think, and we've been saying the same things about Scotland for a couple of years now, where it's like, oh, they could, but they don't. And there's a fundamental difference between turning over a team against the odds or against the perceived odds, I suppose, and winning trophies, right? Like
Yeah, and I
lots
think
of games can come out and
you
turn over a
have to
team.
be realistic, and we chat about this to the sort of to the cows come home about sort of where you are as a team or what you see, because
But
to
Scotland have the
see
quality.
to see someone like Scotland or Wales win a Six Nations, realistically win a solid Six Nations, beating everybody comfortably, and winning a World Cup, like it would never be expected. Like South Africa going in with a similar team to now into a next World Cup, and if they won it, you wouldn't be shocked. We are never going to be in a place where, like, if Wales or Scotland like win the World Cup, that nobody would be shocked by that. We're never going to be in that space.
No, I know, but
We're
like
never.
I'm asking Six Nations, you've got the back, so like you look at their backline, it's quality, right? Like Ben White, Finn Russell, Siona Tuipulotu, arguably the form center in the home nations. Like
Hugh
he is.
Jones, Hugh Jones
That
Appreciation Club. I've loved him for years, and I
and that
think
combination just it works, right?
Darcy
Like
Graham, Duhan van der Merwe, Blair Kinghorn.
and then like that's a mental backline.
That's a
Of them, I'd say you probably have 1, 2, 3, 4 certain Lions. Like tourists, probably 2 certain starters.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
in that back line.
You would be shocked.
Then you get into like then you've got Pierre Schoeman, you've got Xander Fagerson, you've got Roy Darge, Jack Dempsey. Like there's some real quality in that side now, and yet they can't seem to turn that into like say they can turn over teams and win games,
but it's still
where do you go to how do you dig in to get a tournament win, like that kind of thing? And I'd love to see them do it. I genuinely would, as long as England beat them. But
I think similar to, I wouldn't say it's sort of like Wales, and we've chatted about sort of home nations rugby and how like the country itself and the teams, and so like Scotland having Edinburgh and Glasgow, like that's it. Like there is their two sort of teams, and the difference that so again I play a Kinghorn playing outside.
yeah, but
France,
Glasgow won the
like,
URC last season.
yeah, going outside, and I get that, but it's like the two clubs, Wales, 4 clubs. When you go up against sort of England, 10 Premiership clubs, like we look at Wales, and I think you that said about sort of Archie Griffiths for Wales, like starting, like it's like third string in a Premiership club, but Wales is like first choice, and sort of arguably now coming in, but playing sort of third string in what is the sort of an English Premiership club. So it is kind of looking at where we are on that, and I can never see the amount of, and again, like everybody else, depth. Like Scotland have got a banging team, but to win World Cups, you need a full squad. Sort of Wales aren't even there with our starting 15, let alone trying to build the level of depth that some of these clubs have got. South Africa proved that they've got depth. England, with their changes, the amount of players that they've brought in,
I think
etc.
the A team for England has made a big difference as well. Actually being able to, like, you've seen now 2 players move directly from the A's into the first team. So you had Finn Baxter went straight from A into the
A game's always
Asher
quality.
Booker.
Was it the England Saxons or whatever it was, like the A team?
Bringing that back, I think, has made a big difference. Like, you're capping a lot of players, you're locking them in, and you're also giving them a bit of a stepping stone into, like, this is kind of what Test rugby feels like.
Yeah,
people are faster.
It's
they're
not
harder,
in the Prem.
it's
It's for this.
Yeah,
It's for.
Yeah,
No, it's nice.
It's
I think it's good. Yeah, it's been definitely good for sort of depth of squad. But again, it just comes down to the sort of size, caliber of home nations, sort of rugby and rugby in your home country that builds that amount of depth.
Yeah, but you say that, like I said, Ireland have been one of the best teams in the world now for a while. They've got a similar kind of size setup, 4 teams: Ulster, Munster, Leinster.
They've got a huge population that filter into those 4, and because you do that, you have massive amounts of sort of the academy and bringing people in from.
They're really effective in how they use their population. I'll give you that, but even that, like, they're still, like I say, it's just interesting to see, like, how you can build, like, consistent legacy. I think the reason that the South Africans have been able to do it is because he's taken very much like I think in 2019 they ground out their win, which gave them a trajectory from which they could build. They then went into 2023 and were like, oh snap, like, they're good. And now I think they're in kind of like the peak. Not they're necessarily a peak, because that's that's to say they can't get better. And I don't think that's the case at all, scarily. But I think they're at the phase where, like, you have a mental impact on teams before you even turn up, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean about, like, when I say, like,
because you're going in.
Teams are like, almost half beat before they get there. Like,
you're going in like, holy shit, and it is the like, oof, like Ireland coming off the back of like these pushing South Africa for like number 1 in the world, sort of all of that sort of. You are going into the game thinking we are. I think a little of that again, sort of Wales that weekend. I think a little bit of it is like you're playing the world champions. Like, you are playing the world champions, and
they are
quite a lot of the media
now
when
than they were
Wales,
in the World Cup.
Wales, the sort of media like Wales, where do we go so wrong? And I feel like it's not that we went that wrong. It's not that anybody particularly played terribly. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like when you look at like set piece stats and this, it was just sometimes I think like the Welsh media are terrible for it, and the Welsh fans are on a whole are actually quite bad for it. It's kind of like, did you honestly expect Wales to go and beat South Africa? Like, the current Welsh team on like this weekend, did you expect to play South Africa and win? Because I would love Wales to win, but I did not walk into the Millennium Stadium thinking Wales have got this by 10. Like that.
The thing that I think was most notable to me about that game against Wales versus South Africa was, like, Wales were trying really hard and actually playing okay, like they did, but like they were really going at it. But South Africa dominated that game. In every facet of the game. Like, there was no area where it was like, ooh, Wales have an advantage here. It's like, no. Like, they are faster, stronger, better in the air, like, better at set piece, like, more organized.
One more scrums, one more things. Like,
they were just
hit more gaps, less.
It's probably one of the most comprehensive wins I've seen.
Yeah, and I think it's what I was sort of like, that Welsh team was like, and
I don't mean that as a slight. I mean that as
man for man were beaten by better players and a better team. I was like, and again, people that call for Gatland to go, and I've started saying it online now. I was like, if anyone calls for Gatland to go, they have to do 2 things with it. They have to, 1, name a realistic replacement for him that would come in and that would do any, and 2, how they would do anything better with the players that they've got. Because
you can't magic up. he can't magic up Dan Bigger again. Like he can't.
Yeah,
He can't.
he's got to go. And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, because I forgot he was leaving those like 15 world champions on a bench somewhere and not picking him. So it's just kind of that little. I don't want to say sort of short-sightedness, and it's also we're in a position that even if Gatland did go, trying to find a replacement to come in, and ironically, what you would like is a bit of a homegrown replacement, but they're not there in the club system in Wales. Two, trying to find anybody else to come in of that caliber to come in with the current crop of Welsh players, so young and actually inexperienced caps wide, but to come in and see enough of those Welsh players to think, oh, actually, I could do a really good job because Gatland sort of mismanaged that team or not done well, or I could do better. It's just not a place. I think it is. I think we're just at that place where you've got to admit that we were beaten by a better, stronger team, and that isn't likely to change anytime soon.
I think,
and it's horrible as a fan to admit that, and it's horrible but I think we do have to believe in the current sort of professional era that we're in, where money matters, players matter, that we're not there and we're behind the curve. I've accepted that. If you could just get the rest of Wales too, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I think England are in I found it really weird. I was reading some of the like comments and stuff on the game afterwards, and they're like, oh, there are people complaining that too many of the tries were scored by the forwards and so on and so forth. And I was like, I felt really bad for Borthwick and the team actually in that. Like the fans there were really supportive actually. So say whatever the media may say, there were 82,000 people like absolutely losing their mind at that game. It was really, there's a genuinely quite a good atmosphere. People were really supportive. So actually it's good to see. I think it's really good to attend the games and not get caught up in the media, because you see like the people who turn up actually really do support the team. So that was nice actually. Come hell or high water, despite all the negativity you might see in the media. But I was like, I felt really bad for Borthwick and team, because that's a no-win game. Like
that's
59 points on
nothing.
Japan.
Nothing to game apart from, well, of course you were going to beat Japan. There's no, everyone would go with that mindset. At the same time, if Japan happened to have actually turned up and done something, it would have been like, oh, fucking scraped a win against Japan, or ooh, blah blah blah.
Yeah. It's like there's nothing, like there is no winning. And I saw like, oh, they're real concerned. Like I thought actually the scramble defense for England against Japan was actually not bad, right? Like they got line breaks, but they got him. Marcus Smith was probably one of his best defensive games. He was sweeping up a lot of the stuff that got missed, which is what you need to be doing, right? Like South Africa with their blitz also concede line breaks. They also miss a lot of tackles. It's the nature of the beast. Like when you fly up that fast, you end up missing stuff.
Someone somewhere is going to hit a gap. Yeah.
That's why you have sweeper systems that come in and like clean that up afterwards. I'm not saying that the defense doesn't have problems. It definitely does, and it's become very prominent with Joel Abd coming in and the departure of Felix Jones. But like again, that's expected, right? Like what did you think was going to happen when you changed defense coach? Like no, it's going to be like
everyone's going to come out all singing, all dancing. Yeah.
No, it's going to take a minute. Like he's never coached a blitz before. They're going to figure it out. You can question whether or not that he should have been selected, but ultimately he was, and as such, it's going to take a minute for it to get back to where it was. But there were some beautiful moments, and like frankly, I don't care where the tries come from and who scores them. Like some of those tries were, that first Ben Earl one, didn't even see it coming. I was sitting there like chatting to my mate, sipping my beer, and then all of a sudden, hang on a minute, Ben Earl mental, like his turn of pace for forward is seriously impressive. The little Tommy Freeman round the back to George Furback, that was tidy. That cut the stadium on their feet.
That was nice. I like that sort of, the Luke Cowan-Dickey came from a bit of nowhere, if I'm honest, because like
nine times out of
10 you get stopped in that position and you go through the phases, and then like it'll go out to a back somewhere to score, and sometimes you need that. And again, I'll always score with the forwards, and like, but you can't blame the forwards,
like, because I've got them here. We're winning
against a slightly better, against a better team. Actually, that would have been stopped if you broke off the back just off the line. 9 times out of 10, you get stopped short, you recycle it, you go through it another 2 times, and then you'll go wide. like that's sort of like if the forwards aren't on. But if you're winning the game because your forwards are stronger, then you win the game with your stronger forwards. I don't.
Yeah, the opposite of that is if the forwards weren't running the ball and weren't taking it to the line, and like weren't mauling, and we'd gotten paid from that. People are like, well, why weren't you using something? You just took your foot off the throat. Like you could have. It's like
Yeah,
no, like we
there's
found
no
a
win there.
weakness, exploit it. Like yeah,
Yeah,
like,
they can't stop us. We're gonna do this all game.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like they really don't like this. I'm gonna keep doing it. But I think it's been a disappointing autumn for England, and I say that almost a little bit dubiously for myself because like when you look at the run of games, I think England probably had the hardest of the lineups of who they were playing in the sense of you go New Zealand in the summer, then New Zealand again, then Australia, then South Africa, and granted Japan was a bit of a meh game, but that's
So I've recently sort of been looking at and doing some work around what is the rankings. And I think I put it online this weekend because somebody said like, oh well, South Africa, this is this, and I was kind of like, Wales went into that game like 11th in the world, and South Africa are first. So although the sort of everybody in Wales would love to think that we can compete at the same level as South Africa can, it's like we're in 11th place, they're in first. Like that's a big gap, like a big gap. And I was kind of saying, I think it was somebody commented on. I was like, so that's the equivalent of Spain playing England. There was not one position in like rugby where England plays Spain, even with their second team, and don't come away with a win. Like there's no, and so it was kind of like trying to imagine stuff in that guise, and it was quite a big stuff that I looked at with sort of Wales, and I think it stemmed on from the last World Cup. I was like, Wales, okay, the loss to Argentina in the sort of quarters wasn't fantastic. But I was like, let's not forget we were seeded third in that group. Like, find me another team that was seeded third in like the other groups that even got through to the quarters.
no,
Like
I know, but like I think that's of the like so just back to the point.
Even
So
England now, England versus New Zealand, in the rankings, it's not that big of a gap.
It's still second to seventh. So it's 5 places.
I'm sure it was well. I'm sure South Africa, Ireland, New Zealand was still coming in at third, and I think England were coming in at 6th, 7th.
Yeah, I think. But no, I know. Like, but it's you end up with. I think it was. So they had the lineup was. Let's put it this way: the lineup wasn't set. You would have expected England went into those games as underdogs, bar 2. I think the Australia game was a bit of an upset. Like that was something that wasn't expected. But actually, like all of those other losses, England weren't favourites in those games. I'm not trying to make excuses. Those were games they could and should have won. Like they'd got.
I'm just looking at my notebook here, Chris. Can you remember your predictions on England and how many games you said that they'd?
Yeah.
Win?
No, I said 3. I think, didn't I?
Yeah, you said they'd win 3.
I thought they would. I thought they'd turn over New Zealand. I was very confident they'd turn over Australia.
I mean, 2 points in it, New Zealand. Again, it's not.
Like, no. Like I say, none of these games. This is why I say like a lot of the mood music is really poor because people are upset that they didn't win games that were winnable. So you can focus on you didn't win games that were winnable, or you can focus on they got themselves into winnable positions against the top teams in the world, not once, not twice, but 5. No, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times this year. Like, now I grant you need to turn those over. Like, you need to start bumbling that if you want to be one of those best teams in the world. But they got themselves in winning positions. I'm like, actually, it's been and considering where we were pre-World Cup, people were saying we weren't even going to get out of the pool.
Yeah.
To now, actually, there's been a fair bit of development where, like, we do expect to beat certain teams, and we should have beat the Wallabies, but they played a hell of a game and won, which you have to hand that to them, right? Like sometimes that's going to happen. And I'd like to see now, I think going into the Six Nations is the big test, is now you need some scalps. Like you need Ireland again,
Now
and it
those
can't be a
games
fluke.
need to be
Now you got to
going
back
your
it.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the next step, right? The next step is 1 and 2 point wins, and then hopefully, and then you build to eventually where South Africa is, hopefully in time for 2027 World Cup, where it's like now we're comprehensively beating good teams. But I think that's still a ways off. But yeah, I think overall it's been an interesting autumn. I've loved having the rugby on every weekend. I'm not sure my wife's appreciated it. Just every weekend from Saturday from 3 o'clock until 8 at night, just watching rugby games. But I've loved it. And now we go into.
It is very much the difference between the Six Nations, and I think we do Northern Hemisphere, same as sort of Southern Hemisphere, apart from maybe a Lions or a World Cup every sort of 2-4 years. You don't
get to see them that often,
You don't get to see them that often, or you don't get you might have the odd sort of one game here if it's not away or they're coming over, but actually having it on your doorstep, having access to watch teams like sort of Fiji, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia every weekend that we don't normally get. Like we've all really sort of England, Scotland, Calcutta Cup again, Wales, France. You sort of know what you're getting, so that's been nice. Fancy game. So this is the first time they brought out an Autumn Nation Series fancy game to go along with it. So we've been playing that. Hopefully you've had a look and joined the DXV League that we've started for it. Surprisingly ended when I had a look at it this week, despite another week going. But I guess with only one game next weekend, you can't exactly have a fancy game where you can only pick pick from one home team. And
everyone picked the exact same team. Who you got at 8?
It's like all comes down to who you've got at Super Sub. And even then, another 8,000 people have got the same Super Sub as you. That's been it's been. I think the Six Nations, the app itself, has been looking pretty good. So
yeah, it looks good. I don't like the gameplay's been a bit. There's a few things I didn't like. The app doesn't update very quickly. One cool thing they do is they do allow you to do last minute changes. So if someone drops out, they'll let you go in and change them out, which that was new from the Six Nations because it's the same app provider. I like that. I thought that was really good, actually. It might be something we look into implementing into our game if we can. The other piece that I thought is quite cool, the scoring systems, not bad. It's quite good. So it accounts for quite a lot of the kind of actions, but the major downside is only being able to pick from the home nations. So that kind of put a little bit of a dampener on it because you're like some of the top right now the best team in the world is South Africa, right? So invariably people are going to want to be picking teams from there. Some of the most exciting players, you had the breakout player of Wallace Atiti, and people want to be picking him, and I think that makes a massive difference. And I found that I really only had maybe 2 or 3 nations in my team at any given point.
I was just going to say the same. I think when you sort of look at it, because you're only selecting, and again, only a few of the teams are playing on sort of like the week 1, the week 3, week 4, and then the other sort of weeks. But then, it got to the place where you could choose, I think, 6, 8 from the same nation. I think I look at my team from this weekend, and majority, as many England players as I can, because you were playing Japan.
Yeah.
Am I picking Welsh players against South Africa? No, I'm not. No. Yeah. So I looked in there, so I had sort of like, and it was all made up, I think, of Ireland, England. I think I chucked the French player in there maybe. So yeah, I think that was a bit of a stumbling point for the game itself. I think it's really hard to get into something as well when sort of they had like week 0 with only like the 2 teams, and then you're only sort of in it for one, 2, 3 weeks, and then it's closed again. So it's a bit, sort of wasn't there
I
long
thought it
enough
was
to
a
sort of.
bit underwhelming. I think the Six Nations was really good because it's set up for that, and I see how it happened, but I think it's ideally you'd want to see kind of everyone playing you can pick from. But it's better than zero, right? Like, so
Yeah,
ultimately there was a game you could play, there was some fantasy you could get involved with. The actual way they marketed it as well was quite good. Fantasy Rugby Geek, he's done a load of posts about it, which was great to follow. So that was definitely worth keeping an eye on. It was worth playing. Like, I wouldn't regret playing it. I'd just say,
yeah,
like, there's some of the UI I think was a bit, and some of the kind of how you navigated it. So how I see things, how I'm reading the stats. I like the little chart they do at the bottom
yeah. I
of
was
each
quite a big
player.
fan of the sort of Hall of Fame, sort of every week.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
That's
But
something that I really quite
some
like.
stuff I. But
But
yeah,
yeah, no,
it's back again for the Six Nations. It'll be the same game, and it works then because you've got all the home nations to
yeah.
pick from, right? So, um,
And you've got
and then it
something
becomes.
known, and that's now we've mentioned the Fancy Rugby Geek. It's no doubt Chris will be updating his Twitter bio soon. But you've actually gone and beaten the Fantasy Rugby Geek in the
I know,
Autumn Nation.
I checked it.
You've, albeit after rounds, you've beaten him by 7 points. And it is one of the bits that I was looking at, because actually sort of the scoring metrics within our game, etc. But even after sort of all the choices that you've had from home nations, after all the weeks, all the games, you've still landed, I think, the top. So between the top four, you were in first, I was in fourth. George came in second, and then we got Grumpy Old Prop at third. We're only 9 points difference.
Yeah.
And that is, and even sort of overall, when you look at the sort of overall, I think I finished up about 540th. Actually, now I have a look. But yeah, it's incredibly close. Like at the overall, and I've sort of gone back to the scoring metrics and had a look sort of week on week. And because sort of compared to our game, where I think players are scoring sort of more points, you've got a bigger variety in the points that they're scoring. Where I think in this, it's still very close.
Yeah.
Sort of like the totals mean that every week everyone's actually within, like, you're always within just a few points of the person above you. Yeah, it's really, really close. I think that's come down to
Should we have a quick look ahead to the? Should we have a quick look ahead to the Premiership coming back? So the Premiership comes back for one round.
So yeah, I was about
until
back to our business, back to what we're really excited about for one round.
Yeah, you get one round of it, and then it takes another month break until Christmas. But this weekend, you've got Harlequins versus Bristol at the Stoop, Falcons versus Sarries at home for Falcons, Saints versus Gloucester at Franklin's Gardens, Bath versus Chiefs at the Rec, and finally Sale versus Leicester at In Sale. And I'll be back to our kind of our game, which is going to be interesting, actually, getting my head back into kind of the players. Some of the prices have updated as well, so there'll be some new challenges around there, and there may be some changes in the game coming up as well. So it'll be an interesting week. But if we go through some quick predictions now, you feeling ready to have a stab at it?
Why not?
Oh,
let me just make some. Let me get my notebook ready. Here we go.
Okay. Quins
game.
versus Bears then at the Stoop.
Stoop. So Quins at home. I don't know how many England players. How many of the international players do we think are going to be straight back into there?
So there's a few squad players who'll come straight back. So the likes of Northmore will go straight back in. I expect Dombrandt hasn't had that many minutes. I expect he goes straight back in. Marcus Smith might get a rest. But they've still got
Just
Jared
having a look
Evans.
now. So Harlequins before the break, last 3, win, loss, win. Bears, win, loss, win.
Bristol only had Harry Randall and Ellis Genge, and I expect Randall will go straight back in because he hasn't had that many minutes.
That much game time. I'm going to go Bears, and I'm going to say it's a close affair. But I'm going to say
Not
Bears.
Even that bold, actually. It's not even that bold.
I'm going to say Bears.
You know what?
Yeah, locked it in.
You know what? I'm also going to say Bears.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm going to say Bears, but
yeah, I'll say Bears. I think it's going to be close, but I'm going to say Bears.
Yeah.
On the road.
Right. Newcastle versus Saracens. Newcastle at home.
The interesting fact here is, again, 3 games before the break, Newcastle went loss, win, loss, and Sarries went loss, win, loss. So if we just look at the sort of couple of weeks up into the break,
they're the same. Yeah.
I mean, it's 50-50.
No, although in fairness, in the Prem Rugby Cup, so the week before, I couldn't watch the game, which really annoyed me. But Sale took on Falcons in the Prem Rugby Cup, and usually they'll kind of blood their academy players and use that. But both Sale and Newcastle went pretty full bore. Sale obviously missing Tom Curry, Ben Curry, some fairly big players, Poku Forger, etc. But Falcons beat Sale, which quite impressive. So they may be finding a little bit more confident. I mean, are Sarri to jump too far?
We sort of said going into for a Falcons team that isn't going to lose against some key players, some key sort of performers, maybe that other clubs have relied on or that all are used to, etc. So it gives them a bit more time as a team,
a unit, yeah,
as a whole team. I still don't think
they've got enough.
I still don't think they've got enough. Not against the likes of, I think, Sarries. No.
Ollie Hartley's back for Saracens. Sam Spink's in for Saracens. Lazowski will go straight back in because he's had no game time. I expect Dan will probably start, give Jamie George a bit of a rest.
Yeah.
Atoje might get a rest. Ezekiel is back in. Yeah,
it's got to be Sarries. I haven't seen anything that would tell me anything otherwise.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Sarries as well, just because I don't want to embarrass myself. Saints versus Gloucester.
So this, I think, will be an interesting one.
Gloucester had a terrible, and I repeat, terrible day at the office in the Prem Rugby Cup and got an absolute beating laid down on them, which was a fairly stacked Gloucester team by Exeter at the weekend.
I think without, again, with the sort of, let's be honest, like the Welsh team that they've taken out of Gloucester.
Much have got the Welsh team.
The Welsh team that they've taken out of Gloucester, unless they were all back.
The 5th Welsh region.
Yeah, unless they were all back and all playing, I can't see Gloucester getting past Saints.
Yeah, no, at home.
Saints at home as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Although they both, like I said, both lost 2-1 in the last 3, so
yeah,
no way of knowing.
Saints.
Yeah, I'll go Saints as well. I think Gloucester, because Thomas Williams is injured, and I think he makes a massive difference.
Big difference
to that team in terms of speed. I mean, they've got a quality 9 behind him in Englefield.
But yeah, I think like Thomas Williams, and when you've got
Thomas Williams is adding
when you've got an international 9-10 combo, it
makes a massive difference here. Yeah, and I think Saints they'll have a few players rested after the Autumn Nations, but not too many. I think Freeman might get a break, but cool, Hendy will play then.
Oh no, and he's been
Yeah.
storming. Yeah.
Yeah, like
You
it's
see, like that little like, oh, just catch a little chip through, or just bump someone and just bang 60 meters up the pitch. Like, yeah, thanks. Next one's the
all
interesting one.
right. Bath versus Exeter. I feel really badly for Exeter here. Not saying they can't do it, but like it'd be fair to say the odds are stacked against them. Away to Bath, because Exeter have just found a bit of form in the Prem Rugby Cup. They've started to get a bit of a taste for winning, had a few good games. Granted, they've gone full bore every Prem Rugby Cup, which some might argue is against the spirit of that competition. But I see why they've done it. Like they need to build a bit of cohesion and get
They're doing
themselves
what
back in
Gloucester
the
did
game.
last year, right? They're like, we need something.
Yeah.
But you look at like sort of Gloucester, and they're like, oh, we'll run out our second team and keep the players for what is the sort of the cup final, and sort of, because you need something.
Yeah.
And I think Exeter, with their poor sort of run in the Prem so far,
we need to start winning some games.
Yeah, we need to start winning something. We need to start just generating something.
So I think they've done that, but I think Bath has enough to halt all of that. So
yeah, Bath off the back of some wins. I think Chiefs are still searching for their first win in the Prem.
they'll be getting, although they might get some. So it'd be interesting if they rest Thomas du Toit. He played a lot of the games for South Africa. Josh Bayliss played for Scotland. Finn Russell.
Think, like Bath are quite depleted.
Ollie Lawrence will get a rest, I expect.
When you look at their actual full team and like the players that they've lost,
a lot
not
of them
just English players, but obviously the sort of the international scene. I think Chiefs.
This is probably a good time to do it.
Chiefs are looking at this and thinking like it's now.
They're tired. We've had a nice little like.
Yeah, we've had some good run-outs. We've got a bit of confidence. We've had some sort of wins in the cup. We've got some confidence. They've got a depleted side.
It'll be interesting. I still think Bath do it, but it would be great for Exeter if they could pull it off, and that would really, I think, put the wind back in their sails, kind of thing, and drive them onwards.
I think this is where we differ. I think that Chiefs with their tails up, and I think with a little bit of almost like nothing to lose, and Bath being a bit depleted. I'm gonna do it, even though it's at the Rec. I'm gonna differ. I think Chiefs are gonna pull it out of the bag.
Okay, fair.
I think it's gonna be a last 2-minute pastime drop goal effort.
It'd be. I mean, like genuinely, I think if that happens for Chiefs, I think that could galvanize. That's the kind of thing that can galvanize a team and really be like, we can do this.
If you want to save like your season,
yeah,
like now, like
big
you need
win.
something now. If you go a loss now, like you said, you've got another month before you're actually back into that Prem table. Before you're back in the actual table that matters, you've got another month until you're there. And then again, with that, I can't see their games before sort of Christmas. But what you don't want to do is find yourself after this break, and then find yourself at Christmas, and you still haven't got a win this year.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
a sad Christmas for everyone. Everyone's getting coal in their stocking. Is that a thing in the UK that you talk about getting coal in your stocking?
You get coal in your stocking. It's more up north because there's quite a lot of, like same as Wales. There's a lot of old mining communities. I mean, yeah.
And then finally, Sale versus Leicester. And I want Sale to win, but I think Leicester do it. I think Sale are on a bit of a bad run of form at the minute. They've just shed a defence coach as well, and we've seen the kind of difference that can make for a team with England and the sort of nations. I think Tom Curry should be rested.
I think it'd be really interesting just to see some of the teams, because like you said, I don't know in terms of the relationship between sort of Premiership clubs and sort of international teams in terms of who does risk some of those international players. So I think, like you said, a couple of the players that have been in the team but not had the the game time.
But they also haven't had a break, right? They've had
but they've still been like training and smashed in. So it'd be really interesting to see who comes back and who feels the sort of need almost to, I wouldn't say like risk those players, but feels the need to sort of like actually drag a couple of them back in to be like, hang on, we need you.
You know what a big thing will be for Sale? They'll get George Ford back, which I think will make a big difference for them. But I think
like the Tigers, people like Pollard, does he come back in?
He hasn't had that much game time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm sort of thinking. Come off the bench against Wales, but
JVP, he comes back in.
Montoya. Yeah, they're coming off. So you're coming off the back of a couple of. I think, despite being at home, I think I'm gonna go Tigers.
Yeah, I think. I'd like to see. I'd love to see Sale do it. I'd love to be wrong, but I think Leicester will have enough in the tank. I think Sale's having a bit of a rough time of it at the minute. And I just bought a signed shirt from them, so if they could really pull it out and make my shirt more valuable, that'd be great.
So who are you saying?
I'll say Tigers.
Both
I think Tigers have it in the bank. They have enough. They have enough, and I think Sale are going to struggle.
It's interesting. I'm looking forward to coming, and like you said, you've got like it's really weird that you sort of had the cup bit in the background of the autumn internationals, which I can see like brilliant. It's been good to see actually some new young academy type players sort of coming through, playing in the background, which has been great. But I think that the problem that you've got now is that you have got this 1 week of the Prem where your international players have just been battered.
Yeah.
But you've actually got a big Prem game. And then it's the weeks after that the sort of cup continues with, where actually what you could have done is just postponed what is the Prem game for another week. Players would have had their sort of internationals. You could have just brought one of the cup games forwards, etc. So it's really, I think this is the weirdest Prem game because it sort of stands alone.
Yeah,
you've got a couple around Christmas.
Then we're into Europe, and then it's
European Cup, and I'll just.
You could have just rested this almost and been like, make the game go 1 week later at the end, or
bring them back a week earlier for.
But anyway, I think I got a question for you tonight. If you had to pick one player that's going into your fantasy team, let's assume the internationals are staying out. Who are you picking from all those games?
I think if they all stay out, I think when I look at who's performed, there's me. I should have turned my stuff off before Ollie started ringing me mid-podcast. Thanks, Ollie. Constantly getting his name in there. I'm just trying to think who's actually been performing quite well, who's quite likely to sort of still start this weekend. I mean, we mentioned him before, but George Hendy's been having a cracking few weeks, I think.
He's done really well in the Prem Rugby Cup. He's done really well.
He's also very likely, I think, to again start on, stay. So, I'd probably think, let's go with him. I'm just trying to think who else is coming back from internationals.
I think I'm going to go Tom Willis.
Against
probably Gloucester. Willis against Newcastle, the single most consistent performer. I think from the autumn internationals, he's of all the players, he's the most unlucky to have not made that squad. And against Newcastle, I think he'll have a field day. He's a big old ball carrier and he's beaten more defenders. As a beast. Just as a note, I did a little piece on him. Guess how many defenders per game he beats on average?
I know it's got to be high. So you've got to be talking.
Bear in mind he's an 8.
Back row. Yeah, back. And that's what I said. I was just back row. It's got to be upwards of 10, 14.
So he beats the same amount of defenders as a baseline as Mark Talea. Like, widely renowned as one of the most slippery players in world rugby.
Winners,
and he's an 8 who is 6'4" and 120 kegs. He's a big old boy. So I don't know how he doesn't get. So he's going in my team straight away. In fact, I'm gonna put him in right now.
I need to get off of. I will flick. I'm still firmly in sort of international space, and I think between sort of Wednesday when I sort of finish turning this out and getting this out for everyone to see, I will flick firmly back in. I think the big thing for me is, again, that I need to see the teams in terms of who's back in, who's not back in, who's been given the opportunity.
There's so many decisions that coaches need to make. This is a particularly hard round from a fantasy perspective, because exactly like you say, someone could come in and be like, no, you get no break, everyone's back in, we need to win this game, and another coach will rest anyone who's even had a sniff of international, been in the camp, and just be like, we've got this. So it'll be interesting.
And those people that look. You do want to reward some of those players that have been playing really, really well in the sort of Prem Cup while the sort of international's been away. There are some people there. So despite your internationals sort of coming back in, that might have not had a massive amount of game time or might have had quite a bit. But actually, you want to reward the current team that have been out there week and week, the people who have been performing well in the background. You do want to reward them with a sort of Premiership start.
Absolutely.
As a sort of in, so it'd be really, I'm looking forward to seeing sort of some of the team sheets come out and see what people have gone for. Actually, it's going to make it interesting.
Anyway, I think we've chatted on enough now. It's been fun. We haven't actually had a chance to recap much of this thing. It's been a busy few weeks, so it's been good chatting some nonsense about rugby and catching back up.
Absolutely.
But we'll be back in again after this week. We'll have the European games, which granted you can't play our fantasy on, but always a bit of fun to watch. And we'll have the fantasy game this weekend. So keep an eye on socials. Look out for some key stats that you might be interested to look at, and kind of our thoughts and picks in the team. But thanks for listening. And if you haven't already, then please subscribe if you're on Spotify and have listened to us for this long. We really appreciate it. But otherwise, you can find us on X, Insta, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. We're all over the place. Just Dream 15 Rugby, and there we are.
Thank you very much.